Good evening to you, ladies and gentlemen. This recording is a summary of a presentation that I recently made to the Royal Australian Army Medical Corps. And the title of the presentation evoked a lot of response. And I wanted to share with you in a brief summary of what was actually delivered with this presentation. And hopefully you might be able to take some nuggets out of this. The title of the presentation was called From Gut Power to Gun Power. It's a gastrointestinal surgeon's journey on uncovering the power of your gut to transform our lives. Now, my name is Dr. Arun Dheer. I'm a gastrointestinal and a weight loss surgeon. I'm also an author, a speaker, and also an army officer. But in full disclosure, I want to say that the views that I'm expressing in this presentation are the views of my own self, the speaker, and not that of the Australian Defence Forces or the Royal Australian Army Medical Corps. So with that sort of background, I want to firstly acknowledge the traditional owners and custodians of this land. I stand on the soil of Australia over which this event takes place, and I pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. I also want to take this opportunity to acknowledge my teachers, mentors, and guides, some who are living and some who are not, but who have influenced significantly my thinking and also helped me shape my delivery of the content that you are about to delve into. See, I'm also, as I just mentioned, having been an author of 4 books, I've also been involved with significant scientific research. All of this has allowed me to develop a better understanding and an appreciation of what is called as health and wellness. Absence of disease does not equate to health. Health and well-being is a state of the body and of the mind. It has to involve physical, mental, and emotional dimensions. And that is precisely what I'm going to be talking about when it comes to the relevance of what Army can do, what our defense services can do in order to take this knowledge and apply it in a very practical way for its own members, because defense services needs its members to be in peak physical, mental, and emotional health, because the end goal is to be effective and to be efficient. And I don't care whichever organization you are belonging to, whether it's defense services or you are in the corporate sector, these principles will be very pertinent to you. See, we all know that leadership qualities are something that are present in the fabric of leaders. And there are 2 key qualities that I'm going to be talking about. One is called resilience and the other is focus. Let's look at them one at a time. The word focus, which is the number 1 leadership quality, is something that allows a leader to maintain clarity of thought. Time and time again, several well-respected peer-reviewed journals, magazines have recognized the power of focus. The ability of a leader is that an individual who can inspire his fellow colleagues to collaborate to achieve a desired goal. And that can only be possible if the leader knows how to maintain the focus or clarity of thought, especially when they are under pressure. Now, in this day and age of distractions, where we have got our social media, text messages, emails, Facebook likes, and other things coming left, right, and center, we are struggling to maintain our focus. In fact, research shows that our attention span has dropped in the year 2000 from 12 seconds. It has dropped to 8.25 seconds in 2015, and we are in 2023 now, and it has dropped to about 6 seconds now. Goldfish has got an attention span of 9 seconds, and scientists reckon that now we have a shorter attention span to that of a goldfish, which is a very, very scary thought. So when we talk about focus, we are actually talking about clarity of thought. This is something that rests on the individual's ability to make a decision. The word decision comes from the Latin word decidere, which comes from the word incision. And incision is to cut away all the distractions. And this is where you need, as we call it, the decision with a surgical precision. And that's where there is this term which is getting more and more recognized in medical literature called brain fog. Brain fog is a condition which actually causes the individual to be very, very distractible. And that is something that we're going to talk about a little bit later in this presentation. The second leadership quality is that of resilience. The word resilience means that it's the individual's capacity to withstand and recover quickly from an adverse circumstance. It's just like a mental muscle, just like you have a physical muscle. If I were to continuously exercise my biceps muscles, I know they will become strong. But on the same token, if I put my another arm on sling, and if I didn't exercise it, it's going to become weak. It's very obvious. That's exactly what we talk about in this quality, which is the quality of resilience. It's the ability of the mind to bounce back into a state of balance. And if that is not achieved, it leads to emotional disturbances and mental health issues such as depression, anxiety, excessive worry, and fatigue. Fatigue is nothing but its lack of initiative. If an individual does not have initiative, how will that individual have the leadership abilities to inspire his fellow mates? Now, you would be wondering, what's gut health got to do with all of this? Please stay with me and I'll explain to you how all of this is interlinked. I'm going to take you back into history a little bit in order to build a context around all of this. This is Hippocrates, the father of modern medicine, and he in 320 BC said that all disease begins in the gut. Now, what a profound thing to say at that point in time, Now, the Eastern traditions who practice things like, Ayurveda, Eastern healing arts, Buddhism, they recognize that there are these energy centers in the body, and the third energy center is also called the solar plexus. Now, as a medical student, when I was doing anatomy dissections and then I translated further into my training into surgical training, I actually explored this subject further because coming from an Indian origin, I had some basic raw understanding of what these energy centers could do to you. And that's when I came across this thing called as the celiac plexus. Celiac plexus is nothing else but it's a collection of nerves in the area in the upper part of the abdomen, which actually creates a bit of a network. It's like a meshwork, and that is what is referred to as the solar plexus. What is even getting more and more recognized now is the gut-brain connection. The gut has an intelligence of its own. It has got this thing called as the enteric nervous system, and this gut is communicating with your brain through a two-way stream, and there is more flow of signals going from the gut to the brain than is coming from the brain to the gut. And in the midst of it, now we have this thing called as gut microbiome, which is the bacteria that live in your gut and call their home. These bacteria release chemical transmitters and peptides, which are basically protein molecules, which influence this communication between the gut and the brain. In this particular article, which was published in the journal Frontiers of Immunology in December 2020, it actually recognizes that the gut-brain axis is not only powerful to influence one or the other, but these bacteria that live in the gut, they influence the brain's physiology and pathology through a particular pathway which is called the host inflammasome pathway. I would not go into the details of this, but these bacteria that live in your gut can influence the cognition, the learning, the memory, even things like eating behavior, and lots of other functions that are involved with learning new abilities. And also one of that is developing willpower. Now these conditions are so intertwined that if we look at research is in its state of infancy. The other big area of work is that of gut health and ADHD, which is attention deficit and hyperactivity disorder. If we look at the current evidence on this, the gut microbiome from people with ADHD is actually being found to have a very strong link with the brains of the individuals. Now this study that was done in mice actually showed, and I'll just go straight to the summary, it actually summarized that the microbial composition of the gut could be a main driver of the altered brain structure and function in individuals with ADHD. So all of this brings us to the question on why heal your gut. Well, I think that's a very rhetorical question. If we are seeing that there is a lot of interest that is being generated in the subject of gut health. Now in this slide, I'm only showing you citations and published articles until 2011, but I can tell you that the trajectory of the graph that you see in this slide has progressively increased in terms of the number of articles that are out there on gut health. So we have got, gut health has actually gone into advertising, into the food products that we buy in the supermarkets. In fact, the other day I found that there is a probiotic infused bread that is available. What it is doing is it is causing an average person to drown in an ocean of information. Now, before I progress further, I want to put into context a little bit of my own story as a gastrointestinal surgeon. See, when I was training in med school, I was fascinated by cardiac surgery and neurosurgery. The heart and the brain were glamorous. That's where we were having all of the attention taken. But I eventually landed up becoming a gastrointestinal surgeon. And I'm really fortunate to be able to serve people who come to me in whichever way I can. But here is the important thing. In 2016, I had a major change in the trajectory of my own career. In 2016, I qualified for what is called as a long service leave, which means when you do 10 years of public service, you qualify for 3 months of paid like an annual leave, and you could spend it whichever way you can. Now, I was in my mid-40s, and at that stage, people would firstly question, why take long service leave? You might as well retire or take it closer to your retirement. Or even if people who would take long service leave, they would spend that time in building their private practice. Now, I was kind of, not excited by all of those options, and I decided to go into a space of deep study of the subject of gut health. And the result of that was that I was already a yoga and a meditation teacher, and that allowed me the ability to develop that connection between the mind, the body, and also the gut in the mix. The outcome of that long service leave was my first book, which was called Happy Gut, Healthy Weight, in which I present concepts and the evidence and the science around how a happy gut holds the key to achieving and maintaining an individual's healthy weight. See, biggest issue with weight loss, and being a weight loss surgeon, I was seeing this with very close proximity, that it's not weight loss that was the issue, it was the weight maintenance that was the bigger issue with so many of the people. So with that context, let me share with you what was the key findings of my study during that period from 2016 onwards. Now, we all know that when we talk about the functions of the gut, there are these 4 key functions that you can see. We all know about digestion. Gut is the seat of your digestion. You ingest food, the gut breaks it down and it digests into food particles and takes up all the macro and the micronutrients. And if there are problems, it leads to bloating, constipation, weight issues, and energy related issues. The gut is the seat of your immune system. 90% of your immunity rests in the gut, and if there is a problem with that part, it leads to susceptibility to infections, colds, allergies, food intolerances, and the rest. The gut is also the largest endocrine organ in your body. And if an individual has got thyroid issues, PCOS, skin issues, there is most likely going to be an underlying gut disorder. But here is the 4th thing which really fascinated me, and that was that your gut is the seat of your intuition. When you have developed characteristics like procrastination, brain fog, and as I said, brain fog is nothing but an individual's inability to stay focused until a task is completed. That indecision or that distractibility, that is something that starts with the gut, and that took a lot of my fascination. And that's where the research that I was doing in writing the book actually pointed that the biggest killer in our society now is not infection, but that of inflammation. Yes, you may be surprised hearing this, because we have just been the globe is now just emerging from the COVID-19 pandemic. But here is the key finding. The COVID-19 pandemic had the worst mortality in individuals who were obese and who were diabetics. Now, that's just a brief finding that we came to know, and I won't digress, but talking further about inflammation, and the reason why the mortality was higher in those COVID patients was that they were already in a state of inflammation. They were inflamed. And that is what this issue of Time magazine talks about, inflammation being the secret killer. See, this inflammation is the basis of all disease, and it takes root in the gut. Inflammation now, or to be more precise, gut inflammation is linked to everything from Alzheimer's, many cancers, diabetes, asthma, allergies, inflammatory bowel disease. And the best way how I describe it to my patients is that a healthy gut looks like a garden like this, which has been carefully manicured. It has been carefully developed such that each plant, each variety of flower is in a certain section. There is variety, there is diversity, and there is also harmony. There is unity in diversity. Whereas if you don't carefully plant out a garden like this, you and I both agree that it will lead to just development of weeds. And that's what leads to inflammation. This inflammation leads to conditions like leaky gut, which is technically called gut dysbiosis. This leaky gut is then linked to a leaky brain, and I'll explain that in a moment. To top it up, stress, chronic stress, is something that drives inflammation and causes preferential deposition of fat in the truncal area. Some of the symptoms of chronic inflammation are fatigue, digestive problems, allergies, symptoms, joint pain, weight gain, and headaches and brain fog, as I just explained to you. But here is the most fascinating part, which will tie us back to the 2 original leadership qualities that we were talking about, that if there is gut inflammation and dysbiosis, it inevitably leads to neuroinflammation. What it means is, through the same inflammasome pathway that I spoke about in the initial article that I showed, it creates an inflammatory condition in the brain, which is now linked to conditions like multiple sclerosis, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's disease. And as you can see in this slide, the section on the right actually describes that chronic stress, depression, and anxiety actually leads to a disturbed gut-brain axis, and is actually, there is a 2-way stream that is happening where the gut influences the brain and the brain influences the gut. So I'm sure you've heard about Parkinson's. Any guesses on where Parkinson's start? Well, according to this study that was published in a very well-reputed journal called Nature, it actually talks about intestinal inflammation as the main cause where the disease of Parkinson's actually begins. Now, Parkinson's is a brain condition, but the altered gut bacteria are starting to manifest the changes decades before the disease becomes clinically evident. Also, there is this study called the Zurich study, which is quite well recognized and has been cited many times. The Zurich study actually talks about individuals who have got functional intestinal disorders such as irritable bowel syndrome, IBS. It's a very common condition, but what they found was a very strong association between irritable bowel syndrome and mental health issues such as major depression, panic disorder, and subthreshold panic disorder. Now, these are all very significant associations. So, how do we get into the practical side of things? How do you and I start to check from today onwards that how's the condition of our gut health? Well, there are a few tools that I'm going to provide to you today. First thing is look at your oral health. There is a very strong association between oral health and the individual's gut health, and also the risk associated with developing fatty liver, diabetes, neurological conditions such as stroke, and also cardiac events. So checking your oral health, whether have you had a dental checkup done, those things are very important. The other important thing as far as oral health goes is checking your salivary pH. The more alkaline the pH of your saliva, the better is your oral health. So that's the first part. Second thing is check your skin. Individuals who've got issues with their skin such as eczema, psoriasis, acne, rashes are generally going to be also having a poor gut health. When the gut health improves, these skin conditions also improve. Now, for the sake of convenience and just as a very screening test, I have developed a Fit Gut test. And on my website, this Fit Gut test basically goes into 16 questions, 4 questions in each aspect of your gut function. So 4 about digestion, 4 about your metabolism, 4 about your immune system, and 4 about your gut-brain connection. And if any of these questions that you've answered and you've answered yes to more than 7 of these, that means you need further assessment. And you can do this questionnaire free of charge on my website www.drarundir.com. So with this sort of a background, I think it's very important to recognize that stress, and especially chronic stress, has got a long-term influence on your gut. We have known for decades now that chronic stress leads to ulcers in the stomach, but it doesn't stop there. It leads to development of visceral fat. It leads to development of, not only coronary conditions, but it affects the immune system. So with those links, I always encourage people to ask this question, that who is the smartest doctor for you in the room? And the answer is, it is your body. We have to learn to start listening to our own body. How are you feeling? As they say, listen to your body language. I truly believe that if you listen to your body when it whispers, you will never have to listen to it scream. Now, many of you might be taking this knowledge and you would say, you know what, we are one of those intellectual types. We want to get into reading books. We want to get into this information to actually ascertain the validity of it. Whereas some might be those who would be emotional about it, and you would say, yes, let me approach this in a way that I want to embrace every bit of information. And some would be getting down to action and make necessary changes in your diet. Now, it doesn't matter where you start as long as you progress from the gut to the heart and to the brain. So we have to have a blend a balance of all three of these emotional states. And that's where I always talk about a holistic approach, a whole person approach that goes from the mind to the body to the gut to the heart and then to the soul. And that's where I feel that you can truly heal your gut, because when you heal your gut, you actually get to experience whole health and well-being. Now, there are many things that you can expect when you heal your gut, as you can see in this chart, and I won't go through all of this, but the one key thing that I talk about is that of improved cognitive function. Improved cognition is something that allows you that mental willpower, the focus, the resilience that we spoke about as leadership qualities in the beginning. See, when we talk about elite sports, we are talking about a timing difference of a fraction of a second between the winner and the person who comes second. And that it's not that physically they're not able, they have that mental tenacity to be able to push themselves in that fraction of a second such that they claim the gold. Well, that's the same principle that applies when we talk about the sharpness of mind. And I don't care whether you are a fighter pilot or you are a sniper where you have to take that shot. Well, I can tell you, improving gut health will improve your resilience and it will improve your focus. Because regardless of whatever activity you are doing, whether you are a CFO or CEO or a director of a company, there comes a moment of decision. And that is where you need that clarity of thought, which is called focus. So with that, what I would say to you is that if you are really keen and you do not have the time to read books, well, you can start with something as simple as a FitGut cheat sheet that I've put on my website, which is you can just go to drarundir.com and it is free of charge. You can just download it and you can start applying some of the principles that I talk about it. Very briefly, I want to share with you two patient stories, who two are of my patients who came to me and they applied these principles in their life. One was Chris. He was fairly advanced age of 74 years and he was overweight, and he was sent to me because he was too overweight to have a knee replacement surgery, which is what he needed. He underwent weight loss surgery. Yes, and he did lose some weight, absolutely. But he could not exercise a lot because of the pain in his knees that limited his mobility. But what I saw in Chris was his ability to take on the information, take on the advice, and just follow it through. And that's exactly what he did. He took on the advice that I talk about in the book, and he took it to his heart, and he came to see me not that long ago. And I was so amazed to see him that the guy had totally transformed his life, his activities, his lifestyle. But here is the kicker. He actually landed up not requiring the knee replacement surgery, which is the best part of it. I also have Pete and Deb, who are not only my patients, but they're good friends, and they applied the principles which I mentioned in the book. They never had surgery, just a disclaimer over here, and they love every bit of it. They incorporated the meditation, the yoga, and of course the dietary recommendation side of things. So here is what I have to say in summary. Knowledge is power, but knowledge about yourself is self-empowerment. My purpose of this presentation is to empower individuals such that we can live to the truest of our values. In the ADF, the values of service, courage, integrity, respect, and excellence hold prime. We can only be true to these values when we know that we can maintain our focus at all times and also have that resilience. I thank you for your time and for listening to this presentation. Take care.